Hello, everybody. Welcome to this, I believe it's fifth episode of But Why, where we uh, talk to men and women of God and ask them on why we believe the stuff we believe and why we do it. And I'm here with Brother Devin. He is the former youth pastor and he plays the drums. So, Brother Devin, go ahead and introduce yourself.
How you doing, Brother Cash? Like Cash said, I just play the drums here at the church, help out with the music. Me and my wife, my little brother help out, and a few other people on our team. And was the former youth pastor. Worked in youth ministry for about, I think it was almost 12 years doing youth pastoring. And then we also did some other youth work within the district, within our section. We were youth leaders over that department as well for a couple of years. But I don't know if he's going to ask me about that though.
So, first off, I want to say, how did you become a youth pastor?
So when I was real young, I was probably in the youth group, probably 14, 15 years old. I always had a burden and a desire to kind of help out with youth ministry in general. And then as I got older, I just always had that same desire to help, not just being youth minister, be a youth pastor to preach or anything like that, but I wanted to help develop young people. And I still like to do that today, kind of being able to help them with goals, dreams, aspirations, inspire them to do things, to do better. And then as I grew older, we read a lot of books, did a lot of things like that in preparation for those kind of opportunities, I guess. And then when I first got married to my wife, Kristen, I think it was like just a few months later after I got married, Brother Hamilton, he was still a pastor at the time, Bishop Hamilton was, and he asked me in the hallway, was coming out and playing music one day after the end of a service. He's like, look, I want you to start helping with youth if you can. At that time, our current pastor, he was the youth pastor, Pastor Jeremy. He was my last youth pastor before I become a young adult, all that such. Um, and we just kind of fell into that role. But like I said, I think a lot of that kind of come in line with you know having the place where you have some preparations in your life, where the crossroads of opportunity and availability kind of come at the same time. But we were also in a place of preparation for some of that stuff in our lives. But God just kind of worked it out for us.
Yes, sir. What are some hard works on being a youth pastor and what goes into it?
So hard what?
Hard works.
I think the hardest thing is oftentimes, depending on your congregation, the group of people that you're dealing with, kind of the demographic and groups of folks that you're talking to, because some churches you go to, they might have 100 young people there, and you be really motivated about it all the time. And we've had fluctuations, ebbs and flows. We've had everywhere from 10 young people to 40 young people. And it's really easy to be motivated when you've got 40. But whenever those young people begin to get older and they age out and they become young adults and you're left with 5 or 6 or 10, I think that some of the hardest times is whenever you're trying to stay motivated, because you need to still work to, as a youth pastor, you need to still work to um, inspire, keep them busy, keep them loving God, teaching them about God, even when it's that amount. Because a lot of times I find that it's one of the most difficult parts in your ministry sometimes, as a youth pastor at least, whenever you're either first starting out with a new group, a small group, or whenever it's a group that is aged out, and then you've got this, you're left with a younger, smaller group that you got to start over with. Because in my experience, we dealt with ages 12 to 18 mostly. And so you got 6 years there, and you think to yourself, you're like, man, that's a long time. But those groups, when you take it over, when I took it over, some of them were already 18, some of them were 15, etc. And so when they start aging out, it starts happening faster than you think it does. And it's kind of like watching children grow up that you raise up, but at the same time, it's one of the things you just got to stay motivated at the same time. But it's also one of the greatest joys watching them grow up, stay in church, living for God, and be strong adults living for God as you get older as well. So
Yes, sir. What are some tips for youth pastors that you might have learned or just any tips?
just ran into it throughout our lives. biggest thing is just stay prayed up. You know, have your prayer life, a devotion with God, where where you're not only praying but you're reading your Bible, reading other books, finding inspiration. Because the biggest thing, one of the biggest things in any ministry, is that we can only give out of the excess of what we already have in ourselves. And if you're burned up through the rest of the week and you're burned up throughout life and you have nothing else to give, like this Coke can here,
Mm-hmm.
you pour it all out and all you got is a little bit to give to somebody. That's all you got until you refill it. So you got to keep yourself filled up all the time with something so that you can give back to people out of the excess of your ministry. Because if you're running on fumes, if you're running empty, then you're not going to be able to help people. But praying, fasting, keeping the word in your life, being diligent to those things, no matter how much accolades or how many people see you doing it. You know, you got to do it even when nobody's watching. So that's one of the biggest things to youth pastors for sure.
Yes, sir.
To anybody in ministry.
Yes, sir. So if someone feels like they want to be a youth pastor or feel inspired, like you had
Yeah.
said, do you have like any encouraging words to help them?
One of the biggest things that I see, especially in young people, um, find something to do, find anything to do. Just because you feel a call to, let's say you feel a call uh, to ministry, well, that doesn't mean that you're going to fall into that just because you felt a desire to that. Because there's 100 other people here who want to be used as well, and sometimes it's as simple as finding something to help lift the load off of somebody else. If you find something that needs to be done, then do it to your fullest extent, whether it be cleaning toilets or helping mowing the grass or filling in the needs that need to be done. Whenever we were coming up, we would make opportunities for ourselves to be used. We used to clean the carpet here on Tuesdays and Thursdays when I was like 14, 15 years old. I'd come up here and do some of that after school. We would kind of training ourselves to find opportunities to do some different things on top of working and doing some things, job related stuff. But oftentimes you'll find your place in the midst of filling in and doing all these other things that you find necessary to be done out of the necessary tasks, the things, the everyday, the mundane things. Because David found his calling to be the king. You know, he was anointed to be king while he was out tending the sheep. He was doing the mundane every day. The biblical way of finding the true calling of God is going about doing the Father's business regardless, doing God's work regardless. Um, of rather, it's something that you really want to. Because like, even though I felt that calling to help out with youth, I helped out with kids' church. We did bus ministries. We did outreach. I'd been teaching Bible studies since I was about 14 years old. I was reaching for people, trying to win the lost. The desire and the hunger for doing youth ministry was kind of one of the things that was like that was kind of like the highlight, the golden standard that I just happened to fall into. But the rest of it was the work that I knew that needed to be done, that I'd found, put my hand to, and knew that it had to be done. And if nobody else was doing it, then I was going to do it. If I saw something, when we were always taught, if we see something that needs to be done, pick it up. If you see trash, pick it up. If you see something that needs to be vacuumed, pick it up. You know, teach somebody how to do those things even so that you can do things that nobody else sees or whatever the case is.
Yes.
And I think that it was, not you'd have to ask smarter people than me or maybe Bishop because what he saw in us. But I think it was some of that caught the eye of those people who were in the authority to kind of set us up in that role as the so quote unquote the dedicated leader in that department. And but often I know the hearts of bishop and pastor, at least I think I do, and they don't typically give something to somebody to do unless they have been doing some of those other things already in the first place, because it's imperative that we do the day-to-day work before we're given that title or anything of that nature. Because the people that I've seen that were rushed into a position too soon or too hastily, sometimes it can cause destruction in their lives. oftentimes, and that's the thing that I would be leery of. I'd be very leery of it, very very wearisome of it, because when you find yourself in those kind of predicaments, those kind of places, it can be the thing that destroys your life if you're not ready for it. So
Yes, sir. So, I said it earlier at the beginning. You've played the drums for a good while here at the church. Can you tell us on how'd you get into the position of playing the drums?
so to kind of hinge off of the same thing we were already talking about, um, pastor, my youth pastor, he was our drummer beforehand, and he was being prepped kind of to do the role of the pastor. He was called to do it. He was preaching more, doing all those things. Well, we didn't really have another drummer, and I had no clue how to play the drums. Um, and I didn't start really learning until I was probably 18 or 19 years old. I might have been around 17 actually. I might have been a little bit younger than that, maybe 17, because I think I was still in high school, towards the end of high school. There was a minister in our church at the time. He was the music minister at the time, named Chris Turner. I don't know if you remember Brother Turner, but he started. I mentioned it to him that I would be interested in learning some of that, try to take some of the load off of pastor, because we really didn't have another drummer. The church our size is kind of odd anyhow to not have backup musicians. But it was just one of them things, because just the way it fell. And he started teaching me a little bit and taught me the bare basics for some things. And then I started, I'd get up early. I'd come to the prayer room before we would go to our church school, because at that time we was in the other building, the church school, and we were here at the church, but we still had church school at the brick building. So I'd come here in the mornings. I'd come pray, and then I would play the drums for a few minutes. I'd get my stuff and we'd go to church, go to school, and did all that for years, learned, and then finally they let me play a little bit, and the rest is just kind of like just constantly trying to learn, trying to grow, try to get a little better, but at the same time trying to be spiritually minded, because playing music, being in music ministry presents its own challenges altogether, separate from youth pastoring. And I was doing a lot of this at the same time while I was youth pastoring. We were playing music as well. But yeah, I mean that's kind of how we got our start. Essentially, we were asked some things. I saw, like I told you earlier, I saw an opportunity where I could be used. I saw a place where I was trying to, and I hate to use the analogy like because we weren't necessarily doing it for anything to be special. But immediately when I saw the need for that, I thought about that story in the Bible where Moses, the children of Israel having a battle, and Moses had the staff, and as long as he lifted his arms up, Joshua and the Caleb and all them would begin to start winning the battle. I can't remember if it was Joshua or Caleb or anything that was there, but I think it was probably Joshua and Aaron that were holding up the arms, and Caleb was the one that was down there battling. I could be wrong. I need to refresh myself on that story. But as his arms would go down, they'd start to lose. Well, I just kind of thought of it as an opportunity to lift up the hands of the man of God, try to help him
Yes.
to do the ministry that he was doing. It wasn't something that I was just like, ooh, I want to play the drums. Um, we love doing it and all that stuff, but it was a thing that I saw something, a load that needed to be lifted off of somebody so that they could do the job that only they could do. And so we just started learning to do it, started
Yes.
making ourselves available for it.
Yes, sir. One of my friends, we were at school and we were talking, and he had brought up the idea for the church to do like drum cams and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And I thought of this, and since we don't got drum cams, but what is it like playing the drums and going to practice?
Work, work, work. I guess the better you get at it, not that I'm like a great drummer, but I'm much better than I used to be when I first started. For sure, I think unless you're a musician, you probably couldn't tell how good or how bad I am. But most of it's just. I mean, we have fun doing it. Don't get me wrong. We find music things that as well that is anointed, and we know that God's going to move, and we allow God to move. But in the meantime, we have fun with it, and we'll practice, listen to the music. And to be honest, I'm the guy that probably listens to the music, some of it the least, because whenever I get there, I'll listen to a song. I get the gist of what's going on. I find out the things that are like kind of like specific to that song to make sure it sounds like that song. But there's always these little pieces in the song that you're like, oh, that's that's this song or that song. Like that song Heaven. When you hear it starting off, it's that doo da 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 ba ba. Like it's a thing that kind of cues people to know what the song is. Well, you want to make sure you get that part down. There's probably like little bitty things we don't get just perfect. And that's okay for us. Um, but we get it pretty good, and we have a lot of fun doing it. Like I said, my little brother plays with us, and he's somebody I really enjoy. We enjoy spending a lot of time together. I ate lunch with him today actually, and I play with my wife. And you don't have a podcast long enough for that. So, but we have a lot of fun. But we have a lot of opportunities that we really enjoy doing what we're doing. But there's a whole we could unpack a lot with music ministry there probably. And I don't want to ramble on you too much on that. But as far as like in the moment playing church, bro, I think playing the drums is one of them things, bro. You walk out of there, sweat it down some days, cause arms is wet, and because I'm wearing a suit and everything, I got my jacket put over it. I mean, you be getting down in there sometimes, and it's a lot of fun. But it's one of the things you got to remember what you're doing it for. And it's about ministry. It's about leading people, into allowing the presence of God to kind of take over in their lives and let them kind of have an atmosphere for where they can worship God and get into the mindset for the preaching that's about to start taking place. And that's what it's about. It's kind of being curious of all that other stuff as well. So I have a lot I could say about the music stuff though.
Yes, sir. For y'all to be listening, I was thinking about this when he said his little brother plays. He's not little.
Yeah, he's 9 years younger than me, but I'm 34. My little brother is 25. Well, I'll be 34 this year in April. He'll be 25 this year.
Yes,
Did
sir.
your battery die?
It just went off.
Oh, I think you still
Yeah,
got a
it just
green
came
light.
back on. But yeah,
Well,
what I said is that
he's
he ain't
not
little.
small or nothing like that. He's my size.
No, he's not small. So for today's questions on why is it important for musicians and the singers to go up there on the platform and to play for every Sunday in church
Well,
service?
everywhere you see in the Word of God, when people would have the tabernacle or the things that would go forth in the Old Testament when they have services, they always had the Levites would be ministering music. Um, Brother Court Chavis, I don't know if you probably have listened to him. He's a beast. He talks about music a lot because he's a musician, a singer. He does a lot of things. His church is very astute in music. We actually went to a conference last year, and he was one of the speakers. Um, Brother Chavis talks on this subject, and it says that music is the only thing in earth that was not created in earth. It was created in heaven. It was created for the purpose of worshiping and glorifying God. And so, anytime you're playing music and it's not glorifying God, it's glorifying and worshiping something. And so whenever we're doing that, we're cueing our minds, whether we realize it or not, that it's time to worship. It's time to lift up praise. And when we begin to exalt God and do all that stuff, we're creating an atmosphere for the miraculous to happen, for the supernatural to happen, for the things of the spirit to begin to start happening. And so it's imperative that we have a team doing that. Now, you don't have to. The Bible talks about this clearly. It's not about talent. It's not about ability. You play to the best of your ability and the best of your talent, uh, and keep trying and staying on it. But you don't have to be a studio musician to have good music ministry in a church. You got to find music that fits your skill set and your talent, and do the best you can with what you have, whether it's a smaller church or a larger church. Um, and it's important that we have opportunities that we can. I had a man that I worked with in youth ministry, and he used a term a lot that we needed to create moments. We needed to create moments where students could have God moments. Or when we're in the church, we've got to create moments that people can have God moments in their lives. And whenever you're creating that joyful noise, or you're creating music, or you're doing whatever you're doing, so that people can worship the Spirit of God moving there. Whereas if you didn't do it, it would just be this little tight, kind of awkward feeling sometimes for folks. And I think that's one of the most imperative things that we do in music ministry for sure.
Um, almost every service where there's been a breakthrough or praise break, it's mostly been during the music. How does that make you feel when you're playing and
Oh,
through the
bro, it's
music?
that's what you go for. It's like we have this. Me and my brother especially love it. We're like we love like shout beat music, like putting a loop on that do that and we pick at the singers all the time because we start playing like stuff like that when there's like the songs like I gotta praise, and I gotta people throwing down, shouting here, going everywhere. People throwing them bobby pins out and dancing around, all that stuff. You know, that's what I imagine heaven's gonna be like. So it's
Yes,
like a
sir.
little glimpse of heaven to us.
Yes, sir.
And whenever I see all that stuff, man, that's just like that's it. That's the tip of the spear, you know, for a musician for me. I've never played in ballrooms or never played anywhere like that. I was always a church musician. You know, I was always in church doing that,
Yes, sir.
and I never had any experiences like that. Didn't want anything like that, but uh, I never wanted to do anything else but see people throw down, have an apostolic experience in church, except for doing it right there at the church.
So I asked you about how it felt when when there's a breakthrough, and you said, and of course they just heard it. How it you said it was one of the best things you've
Oh yeah, as a
experienced.
musician, it is. It's you know, like when you're a church musician, especially, and you're having church, and not that you're performing by any means, but you practice and do things, and you pray, and you try to get ready, and whenever you have church, and then you get done, and once it's all wrapped up and done, and like everybody's kind of like dead and locked up, it's like my goodness, like trying to move dead folks out of the grave, and then you have these other times where you just can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like you get going and somebody just takes off running, and people running the aisles and shouting, rolling on the
Can't
floor,
stop.
and it's like before you know it, you started at 6 playing music. At church they start at the first song, and the next thing you know it's 6:45, and you're still playing the first, maybe the second song. You've been going 45 minutes. You're like, why does my hand hurt? And and you've been going all this time, so it's pretty cool. It's yeah, I had to say that's probably the funnest thing about it. But there's a lot of other stuff to it for sure.
Yes, sir. So I've asked you about hard works on being a pastor. What are you can name at least one or two of some hard works or stuff that can really help somebody for playing the
Yeah.
drums.
Well, I guess for me, I've been a minister all of my music career. I guess you could say playing music too. It's kind of like I've always played. I wore multiple hats. Like I said, we was youth ministry. We was doing section ministry along with that, and then we were doing music all that time, teaching Bible studies. Well, like right now, we're still doing music and we're still doing ministry, and so I think one of the hardest things as a musician is not oftentimes being able to go down into the altars and work with people a lot, because unless you have like a couple, unless you have a depth of musicians, um, it's you got to kind of play that balance where is it going to affect, because as soon as the music stops, or and I'm not saying that like one instrument or anything like that is more important than the other by any means, but like if you've got a guitar player and a piano player and a bass player and an organ player and a drummer, and the guitar player stops and the piano player keeps going, or the vice versa, it doesn't, like, the music really, like, it changes, but it doesn't, it is like they don't feel like it, the drive of it stopped. You take the drums away, a lot of times it like dries it up a lot, especially in church music, because like we are getting down.
Mm-hmm.
and and
Yeah.
and so when you take that out, you almost see people that they'll kind of be worshiping, doing something that's just kind of, it almost cues them that like we're stopping and doing something different for a second there. And so like if something good is happening, you don't really want to stop that. And so
Mm-mm.
I guess one of the hardest things to answer your question, beating around the bush, I guess, is that you got to stay prayed up, because you're not going to be able to be out there worshiping and a lot of times doing what you usually do. You have to let that be your worship. You have to you have to keep your prayer life up in any music ministry facet. because you're going to miss a lot of more opportunities as a musician to get ministered to, or to be in the altars helping people out or doing what you love, if that's something that you love. But it was one of the things that Pastor told me whenever, because he, like I said, he was the previous drummer for us. Whenever he was talking to me, he always told me, he said, man, you've got to be careful whenever you start playing the drums that you don't let that your prayer life and your relationship with God start slipping through the cracks, because you it's really easy to get in that cage, or most drummers in churches, they're in cages or somewhere in the back or in a corner or in a place where they're whatever the case is. It's easy to get in that little spot and get comfortable sitting on that little drum throne, and never stepping out and doing the things that you need to do in a certain sense. And sometimes we still do, for sure. But learning the balance that you need to have to not let, you can't justify and have one ministry. Too much of anything can be a bad thing. If you have a family and you're wanting to pray 9, 10, 12 hours a day, but you're neglecting your family, you forgot the main purpose in your relationship with God. Because if my family doesn't love God, because I didn't have a relationship with Him, or whatever the case is, it creates an imbalance in your life. We got to have balance in our lives as Christians, and the same thing goes with any ministry. You got to have a balance where you don't justify missing a lot of our other opportunities because of the fact that you're busy doing something else. Just because you're busy doesn't mean you're doing the will of God. Oftentimes,
Yes.
Being busy doesn't mean that you hit the nail on the head. Being busy doesn't mean you're moving anything or moving anywhere. You've got to actually have function and actually got to have movement to justify the energy being burned off, or whatever the case is. And you've got to have that balance. You got to have rest. You got to have times where you're back home with your wife or your family or your loved ones or your parents. You can't just burn the candle at both ends.
Yes,
and
sir.
think that everything's going to be okay, regardless, because you're doing the work of God. Because sometimes you can get to a point where you're wore out and you need to recharge your batteries, and that goes for any ministry, though. No matter how young or how old or what you're in or how much you're in, if you don't do something, it's gonna change you. It's the wrong. It doesn't lights just go off on them. They're fine. They're on, because I'm seeing it right here. They're both reading. Okay.
All right. So you had been talking about prayer, being a youth pastor and being a musician. Do you have any encouragements to help somebody keep up prayer for whatever?
Man, don't get discouraged because you had a 30-minute goal and you only had 5.
Yes, sir.
Don't quit waking up because you want to read 5 chapters in your Bible and spend an hour praying, and you only got the 2 chapters, and something happened. Like any time with God's better than no time with God.
Yes, sir.
You got to make the time. Have you ever read this book? It's called I think it's called, I don't know exactly where what I'm about to tell you comes from, but I think it comes from 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. You ever read that book?
I don't think I have.
It was originally made. The book was originally called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, but they made one for teenagers. And one of the principles they had in there was about time management. And one of the questions they asked teenagers, especially, they said, "Well, how much time do you have?" I said, "Well, man, I've only got 30 minutes to spend to this one task." I said, "Well, how long did you spend watching movies last week?" I said, "Well, I spent 5, 6 hours, whatever, 4 hours." Well, at this time, social media wasn't out, but in the current one, they asked the question, "How much time do you spend scrolling on social media or on YouTube?" I said, "Well, I spend probably 2 or 3 hours this week, or more." They asked questions like that to them. I said, "How long did you spend doing X, Y, and Z? How long did you do this?" And what they were doing was they were shaving a few minutes off of certain tasks so that they could take those things back. Not that, having a good time with your family, watching a movie or something. What they were saying was that too much of this thing is eating up your time.
Mm-hmm.
Too much of scrolling on your phone is eating your time.
Mm-hmm.
If you would take some of that time, those things away, you have the time available. You just got to structure your week. And sometimes, especially living for God, reading, praying, stuff like that,
Yes, sir.
it's about making it the priority. Because I had a man tell me in the oil field one time when I was working in the oil field, he said, men, especially, we do whatever we want to do. And what I mean by that is, if you want to do something, it don't matter how busy you are. It don't matter how hard it is. It doesn't matter how much money it's going to take you, how much energy it's going to burn.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find it in you to do it.
Yes, sir.
Because if you want to do it, you will do it. And if you want to live for God and you want to pray and you want to read your word, there's no excuse that'll get in the way, because you're gonna do it because it's something you want to do and you want to have a relationship with God. I heard Bishop say it the other day when he was teaching or preaching. I don't know if you wrote this down, but I did. He said it. I got it on my iPad, but anyways, he said it. Benjamin Franklin said it like this one time. He said, "A man that's good at making excuses is not good at anything else."
Mm-hmm.
So you can decide to be somebody that makes excuses, or you can decide to be somebody that decides to do the hard things in life. Anything that's worth doing in life is going to be a little difficult, Cash.
Yes, sir.
And that's for anything, whether it's eating right, exercising, living for God, doing the ministry. Anything that's worth doing is going to have positive gains on the back end, and it's going to be real difficult on the front end. Eating a cake's really easy, but it's going to have bad results later on if you keep eating a cake every day.
Yes, sir.
It's really easy to not do things right, but the results of that lead to a hard life.
Yes, sir.
It's the same thing with praying and reading. You just got to make it up in your mind that, hey, I may have missed my schedule, but tomorrow I'm gonna get back on the horse and I'm gonna do it again. And even though I missed a few minutes this morning, I'm gonna make the best of what I can out of it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Well, thank you, Brother Devin, for doing this podcast with me. I'd like to remind you, if y'all are in Faraday, Louisiana, stop by the Pentecostal Miss Lou, 10 a.m. on Sunday morning, 6 p.m. on Sunday night, and 7 on Wednesday, and 7 p.m. on Wednesday, where our pastor does lessons, and he's right now in the book of John, I believe. So if you stop by,
he's working on the fruits of the Spirit right now.
Yes, sir. So if you're by, please stop by. But thank you for listening to this podcast, and have a great day, and God bless.